Greetings, fellow blade enthusiasts. Thank you for checking out a StudioGDT review. Today we're going to be taking a look at a custom katana from Sinosword.com, otherwise known as JKOO, and I hope you like it. Disclaimers, get this out of the way first. I am by no means a katana expert or sword expert. I am not an expert in Japanese swordsmanship. I dabbled in a little bit 20 years ago and recently I'm getting back into it. My experience for non-Nihonto comes from 20 years ago when there were not a lot of options. My personal sword that I owned was from Last Legend, which is no longer here today, so that's really where my frame of reference is coming from. The swords that I'll be reviewing were purchased, I should say, with my own funds, so they are not review samples. I was not hand-selected to be delivered anything. So really as a random customer off the street placing a custom order, and what I received in that experience would be similar perhaps to your own. So let's talk about the concept here. I wanted to create something that had a classic motif. I really like swords from the mid to late Muromachi period, as well as the Genroku period or era, I should say, in Edo. And what I came up was, after searching through some fittings on the Sinosword.com website, I found this Asano clan theme. I thought that was kind of interesting. It rang to me a little bit because the Asano clan had some pretty important points in history as far as the Lord of the 47 Ronin, as well as one of the last 3 daimyo ever to exist. So I thought there was some historical interest in that, as well as aligning with the period that went into the design and theme of the sword itself. Let's talk about what the purchasing process was like. Sinosword.com's custom build website is pretty easy to use. It's got some nice pull downs on it. I found I was able to really ask, at least in my mind, for what it was that I was looking for. They give you a nice note section to be able to make additional requests or maybe spell out some things that you would like changed or manipulated. They were fairly good at responding to those requests. Obviously, there's a bit of a delay in the communication from that. Can be language barrier at times, depending on what words you use or if you're using slang or anything like that. But overall, from what I put in on the order form and what was kicked out, it was pretty accurate. There was a special circumstance that happened in regards to the sword, and in reality, this is actually a replacement sword. I don't want to review both the first sword I received and the replacement sword in the same review. I don't think that's fair. But know that JKOO and Van at JKOO took care of me. And if you wish to find out kind of what happened with the initial experience with my custom order, there will be a follow-up video to this that talks about what happened there and what that customer service experience was like. Initial impressions upon receiving it was that it was packaged well. The package didn't appear to receive any damage in transit. It was a cardboard box wrapped in what appears to be the customary yellow tape that I've seen in other reviews. It had wedges of styrofoam in there to keep the sword centered. It was a solid box, and the sword was packaged in a very, very thin sword bag that I would kind of consider discardable. It was a very thin, almost like microfiber type material that was probably good to keep dust off of it in transit, but not anything that I would use for more than that. There was no apparent damage in shipment. Everything looked good. It was coated in a heavy dose of oil. Not a big deal. Initial impression was that it arrived well. The Tsuka was shrink wrapped in plastic and kept tight, and everything looked like it survived okay. Let's talk about the statistics of the blade. It is a folded laminated blade made out of T10 steel and a softer steel inner core. It's folded in the Kobuse method, I believe is the right way to pronounce it. Could be wrong there on that. And it has a Hazuya polish. I requested a 29-inch blade with O-kissaki, 1-inch Sori. Midare style Hamon with He. I requested an 11-inch fully wrapped Tsuka with brass fittings and cotton Ito. So those are the build specifications of this. Let's actually delve in and look at it from end to end, and we'll start with the Tsuka. The Suka has some parts that I love about it. It has some parts that I don't love about it. I had requested a hourglass type shape on it, and unbeknownst to me, the fitting set that I selected that you can see here, if we take a look at the Kashira, it is quite small. The size of that Kashira, I think, really dictates the degree of that wasting that they would be able to do. It can only be as small as the Nakago would allow in the center, and it could only be as wide as the Kashira would allow at the end. These are brass fittings that have a painted design on them. I did find a classical example as a reference point to kind of build it upon, so I picked it out, and it looked like it worked out well. Brown Ito, it's cotton Ito. It is a full Samigawa wrap. It appears to be probably very juvenile. It is very, very thin. It is not the best quality. It's probably my least favorite part of the Tsuka on this. The Ito wrap does have I believe it's Hishigami on it. It is pretty tight. It is not ultra tight, but it is tight enough to where I do not feel any movement under normal manipulation of it. If I push very, very hard, I get a little bit of movement out of it. Not much. But overall, I'm happy with it. The diamonds are mostly symmetrical. The Fuchi matches the Kashira, obviously. Nothing really special about there. There are no lips or ledges or sharp pieces to either the Kashira or the Fuchi. They feel fine. They look fine. They don't rattle. They don't shift. Everything looked pretty good. The knot, I did forget to mention, was a little bit bunchy down at the bottom there. I forgot to mention the Menuki. The Menuki is praying mantis. It doesn't really go with a theme. There wasn't an Asano themed Menuki on there, but I love the praying mantis motif, so I threw it in there. Back to the Tsuba. It is a brass Tsuba. It's quite heavy. I don't mind that. It's solid. I think it looks good. There's not much to tell about it other than that there's a different theme on each side. There's 3 mon on one side and 2 on the other side. Other than that, it just has the geometrical patterns that are present on there. Moving to the Habaki. The Habaki is a 2-piece design, I believe. I'm not certain what material it is. It's probably brass and something else. They tried to put a little bit of a design on it. It is okay. The fit is not perfect to the blade. You can tell that it was a somewhat generic shape. It's not pressed to the side of the blade very well, but overall I think it looks pretty good. Finishing out the Koshire, we'll take a look at the saya. The saya is honestly my least favorite part of the whole sword. It's probably where JKOO needs the most work. Now, somebody did do something on this saya that I like that I have not had replicated on 3 other swords so far. And whoever made this saya, although they were working very quickly, I'll never know if it was the same person that crafted it as the same person that painted it. I won't know that. But somebody had a bit of an idea with this that I appreciated. I did request a 29-inch blade, and the Kurigata placement should probably change if you are larger, taller, have larger hands. The original sword that I received and most that I've seen since then, the position of the Kurigata is just barely one of my fist widths. And in some cases, it's less than a fist width. So I really can't get my hand positioned there properly. When this sword was being created, somebody put together 2 and 2, I think, and they moved that Kurigata back. It's actually moved back about 5 inches from the Koiguchi. I really like this. It gives my hand all the room that I need. I still get to feel it as a reference point on the side of my palm, but it's right where I would want it to be. So I think next swords that I order, if I get to be able to change the position of that, that's going to be where I'm going to have it. If you're 5'11", 6 foot tall or so, and have average size hands, I don't have giant paws and I don't have small hands, it fits quite nice. So I would recommend that. The buffalo horn pieces on this, I think, are nice. They have a good color to them. They're natural. They're shaped well. I don't really have any issues with that. The issues that I have with the saya are going to be the Habaki fit to the saya. It does not really fit well. The sword did not insert all the way when I received it. I know sometimes there's weather swelling and whatnot. I'm in a particularly dry climate. It was more than dry. It didn't really have any change to it. I had to do some filing with that, and realistically, the lines of where the Seppa meet up with the Koiguchi are not very good. There's also, you can see some change in the shape of it. There's a bulge almost where they were working that Habaki in there, as well as some other ripples throughout the length of the saya. So it was not my favorite piece. I don't think the painting was done particularly well on it, but overall, when you're looking at a price tag of around $350 to $375, there's going to be some things that you're not 100% happy with. You're going to have to take some to get some. So leading away from the saya, there's a little bit of rattle on it. There isn't any different rattle, or more rattle, I should say, than in the Japanese-made premium Tozando Yaito behind my back. So it doesn't really bother me that much. I've never known any different. Perhaps if I had a nice high-end Nihonto, I wouldn't hear those rattlings. But overall, the saya is probably the piece that could use the most work. The Shirodome, they're not glued in. They feel plastic. That is pretty standard. And the lacquer job was not ideal. There's some running happening in certain areas. Again, this is probably the piece of it that you would have to take and would have to accept. Moving on to the best part, my favorite bit of this, the business end, the blade. I really, really like this blade. I was shocked when I took it out because I was going to expect it to look the same as the first sword that I received. It was the same as far as I know, because again, who knows what happens behind closed doors or what I was sent the first time. It was the same Kobuse lamination, the same T10 steel, the same core. It was the same Hamon requested. It was the same Hazuya polish requested. It was the same O-kissaki requested. It was the same 1-inch Sori requested. It was supposed to be an exact replacement. What I got when I unsheathed it and took it out was a sword that looked completely different from the first one. The first sword looked nice, but it had more, to me, of a Damascus look to it. I think of like a Damascus knife, something that was made from steel cables or whatnot. It didn't look bad, but it just didn't look authentic to me. So I don't know if that was an issue with polishing. I would assume it probably was, because that was related to another issue that I had with that first sword. We'll talk about that later. But the polishing job, I thought, on this replacement was pretty nice. The sword looks like a traditional sword. There's activity. There's interesting things going on in there. The Hamon looks great. I might be pronouncing this one wrong as well. It's an odd word. I believe nioi is the term for it. Correct me in the comments if I pronounce that wrong. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of good things going on with this sword. The lines are tight. There's no issues with, there's no lamination issues. There's no air pockets. All in all, to me, it looks very good. The edge is dull at the bottom half, which is fine. That's, your defense area of the sword. I like that. It doesn't bother me at all. And this particular sword was sharpened quite nicely. It has a strong O-kissaki on it that has a very pronounced geometric Yokote. The blade itself does have a slight distal taper to it, but it does not have the swell up by where the Yokote and the Kissaki is. That being said, it still has very pronounced tachikaze with it because it does have he, obviously. and it handles very neutrally in my brain. You'll notice that the sword, the shape of the sword is a more of a Tori-Zori shape, Tori like the Tori gates, as opposed to Koshi-Zori that has the majority of the curvature towards the handle of the sword. So it has a subtle curvature, even though it is a 1-inch curvature. The Kisaki, I think, is done well, with the exception that there's a small roll on the tip. It's very, very, very minuscule. It more than likely could be very easily polished out. I don't have the skill set to do that at this point in time, but I'm sure that could be recovered pretty easily. All in all, I think the blade looks fantastic. It feels fantastic. It has a strong polishing job on it that was worth whatever extra money I paid for it, probably $60, something like that. And I'm pretty happy with the way that the blade looks itself. My handling review will be somewhat limited because I am not doing any test cutting at this point in time. I need to build a stand first for that. That will come later, so please, if you are interested in seeing this specific sword cut at some point in time, subscribe. I promise you I will get that video out there. It does feel very neutral, maybe with a little heavy towards the tip, or I shouldn't say heavy, but feels like there's a fulcrum when you swing, which is good. Getting the tip speed is what you would want. It draws well. There aren't any snags in the saya or anything like that. It sheaths well. There aren't any issues there. I think it will be nice to train with. I don't see any issues with that. I don't see any reason why I would not want to train with it. And overall, it feels like a pretty respectable sword. Now it's time for what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything's got a little bit of those three pieces in it. Nothing's going to be perfect. So let's talk about the good first. The good. This, for I think it was around $365, $375 before shipping when it's all said and done, I think is a fantastic deal for a folded steel blade. Not only is it folded steel, but it was built to specification, so I was able to select every aspect of it. I was able to select the Hamon that was on it. I was able to get a good polish on it. I think that's great. If you have some specific requirements, and I wanted something around 29 inches. I wanted something with 1-inch Sori. I wanted something with O-kissaki. Try and find that pre-made. I challenge you. There's not a lot of options that would also have a traditional blade structure or a traditional Hamon. You're going to take some pieces of it. You're going to leave some pieces out of it. But if I wanted all those pieces together, I think this is one of the best places to be able to do it. Add that to also being able, for that price, to customize the rest of the sword. Customize your saya, customize your Tsuka, customize your Ito, customize your ray skin, all that stuff. So the good on this is going to be, I think, the overall value for the money. Now time for the bad. There definitely are some bad things about this. The way that the sword aligns with the saya, I would put that in the bad category. Can't really see it too much unless you're looking closely, so that's why it's not in the ugly category, but it's definitely an issue. There is, I would say, a little bit of disappointment with the tip of the Kisaki having that roll a little bit. I would put that in the bad. It's not necessarily a deal breaker. And, of course, the same being thin and kind of underdeveloped. I don't know if that's the right way you would call it. Having some holes on it and not looking as nice, I think, as it probably could, because I've seen another example of it. As far as the ugly, I'm going to go back to the saya in its entirety. Not a whole lot to be really happy about. There's no taper to it. The paint wasn't fantastic on it. The Shirodome falling out on there, I realize that that's a common thing, but it's just another thing at the end of the day. The masking of the Kurigata when they did painting was poor on it. There is that little bit of rattle, but other than that, I think as far as the other ugly category is concerned, that's about all that falls into this. In conclusion, I think it's pretty clear, as far as I'm concerned, there is more good than there is bad and ugly. So if you were to ask if I think that this was of worth to a practitioner that is looking for a folded steel blade with custom options and looking at staying under $400, I think it's a great place to go. In closing, I want to say thank you to Van at Sinosword.com, JKOO for working with me and making sure that I was satisfied as a customer. They do have a record of taking care of anything that they need to take care of, and I always appreciate that, being in customer service myself. I want to thank anybody and everybody who has stopped by to watch this video in its entirety. This is my first one, so if you stuck around to the end, I'll consider that an accomplishment. If you left early, please come back. I promise I'll get better at it. So again, thank you for stopping by, and I hope you have a great day.